The team I want to talk about today is HellRaisers. So this is the team formerly beforehand known as Astana Dragons. They were famously created when you took players from Virtus Pro like Dosia, Adren, Kucha, Angel, and then they added in. Originally, they didn't have Kucha, and they added in Edward and Markelov from Navi, and they made this super team. And then things initially went all right, and they didn't go so well. Then Edward went out of the lineup, Kucha came in. Now Adren most recently has gone out of the lineup, and Simple has come in, this brand new player. So this is the team now. The reason I want to talk about them as a team, okay, is because recently they played in the online qualifier for Dreamhack Winter, which is going to be the 4th CSGO major, and it's the last one this year. And with a lineup like they have, and the pedigree of some of their players and things they've accomplished, this team on paper should be a lock for that tournament. They should be a lock for I think there's 16 teams playing the tournament. This should be a team who definitely are going to be in that tournament. They should definitely be in everyone's top 10. Now then, if you look at the year overall, that's the thing. You look at the results in 2014, and okay, they don't really have that many good results. Like, they got out of groups at EMS1 Katowice, and then they just got smashed by Dignitas. So, okay, 5th to 8th there, all right. Semi-finals at DreamHack Summer was pretty legit. That was good. They were able to push NIP there, but still lost. Okay, there's their best result of the year. DreamHack Valencia was a tournament that only had the 2 French teams in terms of good teams and then them. So if they were really an elite team, they should have won that event. They didn't. They got to the semis and then they got embarrassed by Shox's Epsilon, if you remember. So 3rd place there isn't very convincing at all. Then ESL1 Cologne comes along, 2nd major of the year. They don't even get out of groups this time. Then they go to Star Series 10 LAN finals. They only finished 3rd there. They lost to Navi a bunch of times. Again, not convincing. You should really be winning these events if you really want to stake your claim to be good. And then most recently, just to add in the most recent result, Game Show League final. Again, they lose to Navi. So overall, this is a team where, yeah, you'd have them in your top 10, but they're definitely going to be in that bottom 5, and maybe even right at the bottom of the 5. They're not going to be in anyone's top 5. They're not an elite level team. Yet you look at the team, and they have the pieces to be an elite team. So the reason I bring this up is, in this DreamHack qualifier, they didn't cakewalk their way into it. They actually lost in 2 maps, including an overtime game to Penta, this German team, who are not a good team. And if they go to a LAN tournament, they're not going to place top 8, okay? That's not going to happen. So this isn't a team you should be losing to. Now then, HellRaisers managed to sneak in the back door. They got their last spot. They got into the DreamHack Winter in theory. So, okay, that's all right. But the fact it's even possible for them to be in this situation highlights some of the problems I'm going to get to in this video, okay? So the first thing you have to look at when you look at their team is the style of their results. What makes you think they're a good team is that they are massive front runners. If they have all their players hitting their shots because they have a lot of skilled aimers, then their style of play, that also suggests it'll work because they kind of brute force some of their rounds. When they've got that going, they blow people out big. They win 16-6, they win 16-8, and the other team's not close. Therefore, it never gets into like clutch situations or pressure or like, oh, what do we do to execute and tactic and grinding rounds? That's not even a factor. They just blow teams out the water. Boom, we win that map. Okay. And they can, maps that they otherwise might lose, they can just destroy people on. That's what makes them look really good, okay? But actually, that's the problem. They can't do that often. They have the portion where they get those front-running games, but then they have the games where there's pressure. It's a 14-14 game, or they're grinding their way back, and they got 9 rounds. The other opponent's got 13 rounds. These games, they're terrible at. They are one of the worst teams I've ever seen in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, in terms of top teams with top talent, at games that are close. They seemingly lose every single one, or so it feels. If you look back in their history, it feels like all the key losses, they're just these big pressure games. They can't close games out when they have those slight leads. You can just bank on those 14-14 ones to lose. And the reason why is they can't execute under pressure. Execution, it's all well and good to look at when you dominate and go, right, I was executing great then. Execution, when you can really tell how good it is when you're at a 14-14 situation. You haven't really had any rounds that have really worked super solidly, so you don't have a variety of I can do this, that, or the other. You have to pick the one round now that's definitely going to win you this round and just do it exactly right. Like, here's what we do, and we just have to do it, and that's what's going to win us the losing us the game, whether we can execute now. This team is terrible at it. That's what plays into their inconsistency, the fact that they can't do this, and that they rely so much on the individual skill and the aiming to get them out of trouble. That's the key word, get them out of trouble. They're in situations where if you put other teams in without their skill set into these situations, those teams will be doing even worse. They're using the times that their skills are on to make themselves feel like, oh, we're actually good. Yeah, we did that right. But they're not really actually. The skills are giving you a false sense of how good they are when they could be so much better. There's actually a quote, okay, because people will say about a team like that, like I would, okay, they're just really inconsistent. But people will say that as, oh, you could easily fix that, and that's not a big deal. You know, sometimes they'll be really good. I had a great quote that as I was thinking about this, I found when I did some Googling. It says, the signature of mediocrity is chronic inconsistency, and it's by a man called Jim Collins, who I think is some sort of expert in like how businesses run or something. That's actually a great line there, because that's the thing. Teams that are mediocre are the ones who are inconsistent. And part of the reason why is because they think they're good. They think, oh, when they have the time that the inconsistency means they're actually good and they're doing successful, they're like, oh, things are working fine. No, it's not a problem. And then when things go badly, rather than look at the average and go, oh, on average, we're fairly mediocre. And in this case, even for a top team. Instead, they go, oh, that was a mistake, or he was playing badly, you know, we'll fix that. And so they never really do get to the core of the problem because they never accept that they're kind of mediocre. So then you go forwards from this. This is a team where, if I also break down the style, terrorist sides, they're pretty bad. With players this good, Dosia, Markelov, now Simple, you should be smashing sites wide open. You should be having executes that you can go, okay, we've got these 2 rounds on Inferno T side that we can just go to all day. They're our bread and butter. We're going to win rounds all the time. We're going to be in 7-8 rounds every single time. They don't have that at all. If you actually try and think in your mind, what are the best maps for HellRaisers? The first 2 that come to my mind, Inferno, Mirage. Maps that you can actually mess around with on the T side quite a lot in terms of like rotating backwards and forwards. Crucially, you can go very slowly, which this team sometimes have a tendency to because of their personnel. You have all these parts like that. You'd think to yourself, okay, strong aimers, this should be a great T side scenario for this team. And yet, even on these 2 maps, the maps that are their strongest, Inferno, Mirage, they're quite weak on these maps. They're quite mediocre for a top team. I'll give you some stats. Think about them. Just think of some. Inferno. Their overall record on this map is 54% record online, a win rate, barely cracking 50%. Then you go offline, and it only goes up to 60% even offline. Now you go to Mirage, 51% win rate online. Go offline, only 50%. These are their 2 best maps. These are the 2 maps I would have said, if I'm Nip, I'm scared to play them on Inferno. Even if I'm like Titan or something, I don't want to play them on Mirage. And yet they're not even able to get really good records because, on one hand, they can win over a massive team. They can lose to the same team just as bad, and they can lose the worst teams. And this is what I'm going to go into now. You think of their Inferno and the strong games they've had strong games against Nip. I remember they won that map. They've had these strong games on Inferno. Well, now think back to the worst losses. ESL1 Cologne, Shox' Epsilon, who was really just Shox, Kiyoshima, and then a bunch of people who weren't that skilled, smashed them 16-1. Now think of Mirage. So Mirage, Dreamhack Valencia. Why did I say that? Mirage, they lost 16-1. They got beaten by Na'Vi at Game Show recently. Again, this is a map that they're supposedly really strong on. And then I'll just throw in there, Dust 2 would be the 3rd map that you'd probably say there, right? You'd go Inferno, Mirage, best 2 maps. 3rd best map, probably Dust 2. Again, similar vein. You can mess around a lot on T-side. Very strong aimers are going to be able to tear these maps open. Not the same sort of incredible team play you need on maps like Nuke and Cash. Dust 2 is going to be their 3rd best map, right? That's the map they got 16-0'd by Shoxalon, as we called it, when Shox went crazy at DreamHack Valencia. That's the map they lost 6-15 at Star Ladder 2 seasons ago. Even though then, at the same tournament, they then beat Na'Vi on it 16-5. And then they beat Na'Vi on it 16-6 at Game Show. So you can see the rampant inconsistency even on their best maps. And to me, the maps alone there sum up the initial impression of why they're so inconsistent and why they can't be an elite team. Because if you don't have 3 maps that you're good at, you're not going to be one of the best teams in the world. Because the way people ban against you, they're going to take one of your maps out immediately. Well, you need 2 maps to win. So okay, even if you win on your Inferno or your Mirage, depending on which they ban, well, now you need a 2nd map to get that win. And we've already proven you're not even that consistent on your best maps. So now what's your 3rd map? It needs to be Dust 2, right? They haven't got Dust 2 even as a solid map. We've seen with these other maps, they're only having 60 and 50% win rates. Now you understand just statistically the problem here. So what is the problem with this team? Well, first and foremost, they're one-dimensional. Like I said before, let's go just with the roster. They've got way too many aimers. Every single member of their lineup, the most recent one and the past one and the one with Edward, every single member of the lineup at one point in time has been considered one of the stars of his team. The only one I can think of that doesn't really entirely fit that is Angel, because you could make the case that, okay, Kraftik and Kucher in some of his teams, maybe he was like the third man, maybe he was more in like the Exist, NBK type role. I could take that. But the other four, Adren used to be a monster in K23 and CS 1.6. Edward, when they had him before. Kucher, he was a star player, Orpa in his team. Markelov and Dosia, mega superstars from this region, considered the best players from this region, maybe the best players ever when you look back in history. You look at these players, they've got all the aim talent you need. So what happens when Edward has these problems? Okay, take out Edward, bring in Kucher. Well, that's another aimer. What's the problem here? Your problem wasn't you didn't have enough aim. Okay, let's see. Adren's not playing up to par. We'll get rid of him. Okay, so who should we bring in? Well, Simple, this young, really skilled aimer. This isn't the problem with this team. You've got all the aim talent you need in this team. What you need in this team is you need team players. Where is Smiths in this team? Where is Devilwalk? Where is Fiflaren? Where are any of these players? Where's Happy? Where's Maniac? Where are the players who are going to do the parts in between that are going to make Markelov and Dosia the superstars to carry the whole game and put us as one of the best teams in the world? You don't have them in this team. And that plays into the fact. It's not that any of these problems on team players on their own necessarily are bad. In the right teams, they could work. The problem is, though, star players by default learn to play the game selfishly, because the game works best for a star player when he's doing the things that he wants to do, that work best for him, that make sense to him. You can only have maybe 2-3 of those max in a team. You can't have a whole team of them, otherwise you end up with not enough team play because people are playing too selfishly. They're playing too tunnel visioned, as they should be if they were the star player. And so you get into this world where even when you have all these talents, and on paper this is a crazy lineup, you can't make the best of it because you don't have the right pieces to enhance that talent. You don't have the right support player who isn't that skilled to prop up the talent, to put him in do a crap job that no one wants to do, which puts this star player in a position to dominate the whole game. They don't have that. That team I mentioned before, the Shocks Epsilon team, that was a team with too many team players and too many bad support players, not enough stars. So they were halfway between. This is the problem. These are the two extremes that you go to. That's why, to me, it was ridiculous that Epsilon could beat the HellRaisers. Because it's like, even your strength isn't working for you, dude. You couldn't just even outplay these guys. Or I guess, in theory, we have seen that even the Epsilon team, if Shocks was carrying hard enough, he could match up to the stars of HellRaisers, obviously. One of their problems as well is that they're two star players. The best players in this team are Dosia and Markelov, and they have their own issues. Dosia, oh my god, this guy has a huge problem in this game because I think he's one of the best CSGO players ever. He's probably in my top 5 ever. In terms of skill and impact, he is incredibly skilled. He could have the biggest impact on this game of any player from the Eastern European region. Any of them. From Poland, Ukraine, Russia, any of these countries. He could be the best. He could be the get-right of this whole region. Instead, he's just a very good player who plays at a good level usually, and his game impact is terrible. What I mean by that is, if you ever watch Dosia play, he plays so selfishly, it goes above and beyond what a star should normally do. Like, he's the guy where if you're in a 2v1 situation, he's the guy who's not going to communicate properly with his teammate, and he's going to let the teammate die, and then he's just going to take a one-on-one himself, as though the teammate and him weren't on the same team, as though like, oh, that guy's died, well, now it's a one-on-one for me. Not ever thinking like, well, the concept of trading, for example, okay, I can trade my teammate and let him die, as long as I purposely bait him, knowing I definitely get the kill because I traded him. These sorts of concepts don't seem to go through Dosia's mind. I've even stood behind him at some LANs, and it feels like, of all the star players I've seen, he seems like he's one of the worst at communicating. Like, he seems like a guy who does just tunnel vision and just play and doesn't give like proper information. And the problem is, if you're going to be quite selfish, you also do need to give a lot of information. Like, right, if I think of some AWPers who play off on one side of the map and they don't rotate that well, they have to be giving good comms. Like, okay, no one's spotted so far, so I can be here for a little bit longer. This sort of thing has to go on, okay? If you go beyond this, Markelov to me really sets the tone for this team. Even though Dosia is the best player in the team, the games where Markelov does really well are the games they seemingly always win. The games where he does really badly, they have no chance to win. Now, the two problems Markelov has is, first of all, he's never quite gotten to the level he was in 1.6. In 1.6, he is one of the top 5 players ever. This guy was incredible. Here's the problem, though. He was probably one of the best AWPers ever, maybe the best AWPer ever. He's at that sort of level. In CSGO, I've seen demos of him and videos of him playing CSGO. This guy's AWP skill's crazy. His firing speed, it's all still there. but he doesn't embrace it. Towards the end of 1.6, he was going away from AWPing. It feels like that's the same problem here. He doesn't embrace AWPing. He doesn't want to be a primary AWPer. Maybe he thinks the game impact isn't as much, which it isn't to some degree. This is a problem. You see, if we start with our star players and they've got some key problems and flaws with them, and then we go down, we don't have a good support structure, and then we don't have good tactics that work for us, we don't have a couple of good maps that we can rely on that are bases, you can see where the inconsistency is going to come in here. Part of the problem with not having his stars is not having proper team play. This is a team where rotation and comms, they aren't that good. Like, you can just tell. That's why they don't have good execution on T sides. That's why they don't get into all these 2v2s and 3v3s and just win them with the incredible skill sets that they have. This is a team that suffers in this way. This is a team where, one of my final points I want to make, this is a really great team to highlight a concept that gets lost in CSGO and in a lot of esports games, actually. There's a big problem where the term strategy and the term tactics get conflated and people think they're synonyms and that they mean the same thing. And part of the problem comes from Counter-Strike history. We used to call the thing that you do on a specific round, like, okay, on Dust 2, T-side, on the first pistol round, I do a split onto A. That's a tactic. We used to call that tactics in Europe. The problem is, Americans, their nickname for it was strategies. They would call them strats. And so now people call them strats by default, as though strategy and tactics are the same thing. Here's the key concept here. Strategy is your overall approach to how you're going to play this game. Tactic is the specific things you will do to implement the strategy. So, for example, let's say my tactic is I'm going to do lots of, I'm going to do a split onto A on Dust 2 as terrorists. So I'm going to have 3 go catwalk, 2 are going to go long to draw attention first, and we're going to try and pincer movement on them. That's a tactic. The strategy is, how many times will I go to that sort of tactic? Will I go to that and have it be a fast tactic? Will I go to that and slow the tempo right down? Will I go to that only 1 in every 4 rounds and I'll set it up by doing different tactics over here? The strategy is how you approach the game, what you're going to think about how the game's going to work. This is where HellRaisers crucially fall flat on their faces. This is a perfect team where it's not that tactically they're bad. Look at their tactics, and they have some great tactics that I've seen other teams copy, especially on Inferno, Mirage. I think they've got some good T-side tactics. Their problem is they're a team who doesn't understand at all the strategy side of the game. They play the same way against every opponent. Every single map, they play the same sort of way. They play the same tactics over and over and over, even when they're not working. And I get the feeling them having the aimers is making them fall into this trap. Because what's happening is, when they lose, they're thinking like, well, I could have headshot that guy since they're skilled players. And if I had just killed him, and if you'd have just killed him, then we'd have won that round. It would have worked. They're not realizing that sometimes it's the wrong tactic. Their tactic is good, but they're not picking it right because they're not using the right strategy. This is a team that really does not understand the concept of tempo. You have to understand in CS when the tempo is wrong for you. Like, I'm playing against a certain team. I'll give you an example, like Virtus Pro, for example. The way you play against Virtus Pro should not be the way that you play against Titan. Against these teams, once you start the game out, you need to tell by the way you're losing rounds, or even winning them, crucially. This is a key point. You don't want to get ahead of yourself. Is the tempo right for me? If it's wrong, maybe you want to speed the game up. Maybe when you speed the game up, Titan gets thrown off a bit, or maybe maybe the comms of Virtus Pro, for example, are quite poor actually. If you attack them very fast and you go in this rushed way and you do not even your best tactics, but ones that will work more effectively here. Meanwhile, you go to another team, a team like Na'Vi. Na'Vi always likes to have the tempo be very slow. Terrorist side is very slow. It's working our way in 20 seconds. That's when we attack. The problem with this concept is HellRaisers just do the same style each time. So I think I've outlined quite a lot there. This is like the first one of my little Thorin's Thoughts videos. I'm going to do plenty more of them. So if you like it, subscribe, like the video, all that stuff. I'll make a little playlist of them so you'll be able to just check them all there. They'll be for other games as well. But the first one's CSGO. First one's HellRaisers because it's a topic that was on my mind. And I hope I'm going to create a whole lot more of these. Just regularly update them.